Hello everyone and welcome to my full video conversation with Emily Voss. Emily and I sat down in my hometown of Wausau to film in her photography studio, VOSStudios. And with the help of her dog Finn, we talked over the value of a college education, how she dealt with the pressure to get a job right out of school, her experience interning in New York, and how that changed the way she looked at some of her icons who were photographers. We also talked about the struggles of building a business from the ground up and how she had to put in many 80-hour weeks to make her dream into a reality. If you haven't already, be sure to check out the rest of my full conversations from the Conversationalist series. I've talked with the inventor of the first commercial microprocessor, the director of molecular medicine at Mayo Clinic, and the founder of the first visual think tank, to name a few. I will link the Conversationalist website in the description bar below. But without any further ado, here is Emily Voss. Hello everyone. So today we are in Wausau, Wisconsin. I'm talking with Emily Voss. She is the founder and sole photographer at VOSStudio, and we also have her lovely dog Finn with us today. So thanks for talking, Emily. We're just going to talk a little bit about Emily's path in finding and developing her own business, and a little bit about her work in college and after, and her work in New York, and why she decided to come back to Wausau. So Emily, if you wouldn't mind sort of talking a little bit about your background, sort of what led you into photography.
So my path has kind of been all over the place. I've always been both scientific minded and artistically minded. So growing up, I actually got this like portrait drawing book like when I was like 13 for Christmas, and I was just infatuated with portraits and the eyes, and like that's all I would draw, and I would just draw, and I would paint, and never really like picked up a camera. And I was kind of always on the path of I'm either going to be an artist or I'm going to be a doctor. My dad's a doctor, so I've always kind of been very like interested in medicine as well. And then I kind of had shifted to thinking like, oh, maybe someday I'll be a medical illustrator, and kind of combine both of the two worlds. And then actually 9 years exactly today, I had this first big wrist surgery on my right hand, and kind of had a series of wrist surgeries and injuries and torn tendons, and kind of wasn't able to use that hand for a few years for like drawing and painting. So that's kind of when I picked up a camera, just kind of for fun, and still kind of always exploring like the eyes and the face, sticking kind of with that from the drawing aspect. Just kind of like fell in love with it. Never really planned on it being a career, but that's kind of how I started with photography.
Yeah. And when did you sort of decide that you were going to open up your own studio?
Well, that really wasn't in the plans ever either.
Okay.
My degree is in painting and Spanish from college. We didn't really have photography classes. So I kind of just kept playing around with it in college, and it'd be like a great summer job, but I'd come home and do a ton of senior portraits. But never really thought, oh, this is like my career path. And then kind of after these internships, which I'm sure we'll chat about, I decided December of my senior year in college that my plan was to open a studio.
So I think that's something sort of with like people my age, like our generation, especially like at the end of college, you're in this panic of like trying to figure out what you're going to do. And do you feel like you had like a sense of clarity, like, okay, this, like you said, December, did you kind of decide this is what I'm doing, this is what I love, or was it sort of like a leap of faith? Like,
yeah, it was a leap of faith. I definitely had a ton of support too, which made it a lot easier. But for me, it's kind of been this decision between medicine and art of like, okay, I have the artistic talent, so let's like give it a try for at least a few years, see if I am successful, and I can always fall back on something that's more practical if it doesn't work out. But I thought that this was like the perfect time in my life to like jump and kind of take that leap of faith, like you said.
Yeah, I love that, like being a doctor is a fallback. I think that's so interesting. I really think that's interesting. Yeah, so you mentioned sort of your internships in New York. Can you talk a little bit more about that experience?
Yeah, so that was all kind of crazy too. It started as like, it was like my junior year in college. I'd studied abroad like during my sophomore year, and everyone, like all of my friends were like leaving campus for J-term for the month of January, and I was like, I really don't want to be all alone during the month of January, so like maybe I should just go do something. So I started just like, I got this idea. My mom is great about just like telling me to like chase my dreams and stuff, so she encouraged me to just like reach out to a bunch of fashion photographers, just like see if you could intern with someone for the month, and if it works out, great. Like it probably won't, but like if it works out, good, and if not, like, you can take a class on campus. So I just sent like emails to like a ton of like fashion photographers in New York and LA, and surprisingly got a lot of like responses back. So I started like interviewing with them, and ultimately decided it was a good fit with Jill Wachter, who's a fashion photographer. So yeah, I ended up spending the month with her, interning and photo assisting. And then it just so happened that when I was on set with her, I met one of Annie's assistants, Annie Leibovitz's assistants, and crazy. I just like freaked out, even like knowing someone that knew her.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, like this is an amazing day. So this guy ended up looking at my portfolio, and he was like, you could totally like work for them. And he was like, I'm going to contact them and let them know about you. So he did that. And I was able to like get connected, and I flew out a few months later to interview, and just like all happened so fast. And I was supposed to go after I graduated college, but they called me like 3 weeks before my senior year in college started. Yeah. So I actually had to like drop out of school for the semester because I just like couldn't pass up the opportunity to go and do that. So
that's pretty incredible. He wants to get in on the interview.
Yes, he wants to chat.
Yeah, so I think sort of like when you have these like icons like Annie Leibovitz or Jill Wachter, like, do you think that your sort of expectation of working with them, was it different than when you got there?
Yes. Oh, yes. There were a lot of highs and a lot of lows. It's definitely, you see it as like a very glamorous sort of feel. Yeah. And when you get behind the scenes, it's really not that glamorous. I mean, you could meet a lot of amazing people and whatever, but there's also a lot of, you know, waking up at 3 in the morning and working 16, 18-hour days in the freezing cold or rain, or, you know, hauling just tons of equipment. And so, yeah, obviously you learn a ton, but it's not all glamorous.
Yeah. And so, obviously we're talking in Wausau, so you decided to open up your studio in Wausau. Can you talk a little bit about that transition? Because I think sort of like for people, like younger people in general, city life, I mean, as a sort of generalization, is more glamorous and attractive.
Sure.
We kind of want to be near, you know, the city and the hustle and bustle of that. But what do you think, like, is the benefit of having your studio in Wausau?
Yeah, so it was like a big consideration, like when I was like getting started, or I guess while I was still in New York during that fall semester my senior year, of like, okay, am I gonna move to New York, because again, that is a big attraction, or do I want to go back home and start something there? And ultimately it came down to, I had so much support here, and the community's been so supportive. I'd also kind of established a name just by coming home and doing so many, you know, portraits in the summer, so it seemed like it was a great place, like while I was so young, to like get my feet wet, get started, like kind of get the bread and butter thing, and then I knew I could always like go from there and grow into other things. So yeah, I guess the community support was a huge part of it, and also, I don't know, like coming home and being local, and I guess that was the draw for me.
Yeah, it's nice to sort of like give back to the community that you kind of grew up in. I think that's a really interesting way to look at it too.
Definitely.
And, you kind of mentioned too that you started this young professional or young business professional group. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So kind of like you said, I have been like very involved in the community in different ways, and I think a lot of us, like, as you know, growing up in Wausau, you always think, oh, I want to go somewhere else. But I think that coming back, you kind of realize what a diamond in the rough kind of it is here, and how much there is to offer. But I noticed that we're having issues like retaining young professionals here. A lot of them kind of view it as, you know, I'll go in and put in a year or two, and then I'll go off to something bigger and better. So kind of my goal in starting this group was to create a social environment, not necessarily centered around like the drinking and bar atmosphere, that I could help get people like, you know, 20s and 30s to engage with the community and get involved and like learn new things. So we've done things from like learning to play pickleball, or learning to curl, or like coffee nights, or like just like different ways to like engage in the community. And so yeah, it's been kind of an interesting adventure.
And you just took a trip to New York for a month, you said,
Yep,
right?
Yep. A month.
So is that, do you find that you sort of need like that city fix to like get back for a little bit?
Yeah, that was the first time I've been back for like an extended time since the internships. I've been for like a week here or there, but just because that is kind of the time of year that I can take a little time to breathe.
Yeah.
I just thought it would be kind of a good experiment to go back and see for a month. I wasn't sure what would happen, if I would find enough work or not, because it was my first time really freelancing. But it was so nice to just be able to relax a little bit and kind of get back to my creative roots and do some of that more like commercial work that I really love. So
yeah. So just getting into a little bit more about sort of building up VOSStudios, what were like the really difficult parts of doing that? Was it things that you sort of anticipated would be hard, or were there some sort of like out of the blue?
No, actually it's been, so you know, the big fear is sitting in this space, just, you know, this empty space with no one here, you know, like I have all the equipment, but like where are the clients? But it's actually been the opposite problem, that like, you know, learning to be able to say no and like having to turn people away and like just being so busy that like I feel like I can't give everything to everyone, you know. So that's definitely been a challenge. And then with that, just finding like a work-life balance. Like the first few years, I just have completed year 3 and it's definitely gotten better, but I've put in a lot of 80-hour weeks and like, you know, not had time to spend with family and friends or like get out and do the other things that are important in life. So that's kind of been the biggest challenge, is learning to say no and being able to kind of get back into other aspects of life, I guess. Spend time with this crazy hobby.
But that is really good. And I mean, you see so much of what you're doing just with friends, you know, on social media and stuff, and it seems like you're doing so much work, and that's amazing that it picked up so quickly.
No, I can't complain about it at all. Like, it's a great problem to have, but still, now that I've kind of completed those first, like, you know, years, it's time to start being able to have a life too. So, yeah.
Do you find that, like, when you're working those 80-hour weeks, does it feel like work because you love it? Or is it like, what is that balance of sort of being like, okay, this is my job, but it's also my passion, it's, you know, my own brainchild?
That's a complicated thing, because I know, like, you hear that all the time of, like, you know, when you turn your hobby into, like, your work, then it's not necessarily your passion anymore. And I would say it still is definitely my passion. Like, there's parts of it that I'm more passionate about than others. But so I think to me it feels like a lot less of a job than a lot of people might feel. But there's definitely those days that I'm just like, I can't do this, like I need sleep. But yeah, it's not, I guess it has kind of become interesting that like I don't really photograph outside of work anymore. So in that aspect, I guess it has become really my work. But I still, I mean, I love having subjects in front of my camera and being able to do new things that way, but it's not something I do on the side anymore.
So just sort of talking a little bit more about the struggles of Gen Y, so many struggles. I'm interested in what you think about sort of like the skepticism surrounding college and the value of a college education, because I think for a lot of people it's really hard when you have like a clear idea of what you want to do, and say you have that, I mean, you gain that sort of later on in college, but say you have that going into your freshman year. Did you ever sort of hit that point where you're like, I don't know, like, and I mean, you ended a little bit early because you were, you know, kind of getting into work, but did you ever struggle with that feeling of, is this worth it to do it?
I personally really didn't, but I'm definitely a nerd, and I was very into the academic stuff, so and I was also just raised that my parents always told me, like, we don't care what you are, like, you can be a hairstylist, you can be a truck driver, you can be whatever you want in the world, but you have to do it with a 4-year degree. So I just kind of always grew up with that, like, knowing that that was going to be what I was going to do, was get a 4-year degree in something. But even, like, with photography, I mean, you don't need a degree to be a photographer, you know? Like, there's so many things you would need a degree, but I wouldn't give that up. Like, to me it was very valuable and worth the great expenses. So that was just my case scenario, I guess.
Well, that's a good experience, and I think that in a lot of ways, like, there's so much sort of cynicism surrounding it, but it's good to hear that if nothing else you just sort of like foster that love of learning.
And you learn how to learn, and like even if like all of these, you know, art history facts don't stick with me, like you know, I can still use so much of that knowledge, and like, you know, learning how to write properly and learning how, you know, just all of those skills are so important, whether you use them on a daily basis or not. So,
and you sort of alluded to it just now, but I feel like there's also a lot of pressure to sort of get like a really stable job right after graduation. So something at like a big company or something where you're putting in those hours, making good money right off the bat. And starting, you know, a business on your own, did you ever sort of deal with that pressure? How did you deal with that sort of looming idea of I need to, you know, get something stable going?
Yes, I was very, because I'm such a planner and so organized, it was very like terrifying to me to go into something that I don't have a salary and like don't know, like, you know, am I going to be able to support myself? Am I not going to be able to support myself? So I lived with my parents for the first year just to kind of make sure, you know, I could eat and stuff. So there definitely was that like fear of a lot of times of like, should I be doing something that is more stable? But I guess, the whole leap of faith thing and like trusting in yourself and kind of giving it a timeline of like, okay, like, you know, if I'm not successful in the first X amount of time, then I still have this backup plan, or I can always go to plan B. So. And
you said you had that backup plan of maybe pursuing medicine, and that's something that I think, I mean, I personally struggle with a lot. It's that feeling of like stability, and it's really scary thinking like that in a year, you know, when you graduate, you're sort of thrown out there.
It is scary.
It's a very sort of like, amorphous time, because like nothing is sure, and you see some people who are going out and getting, you know, big jobs right off the bat. Some people are in the same situation.
Social media doesn't help with that either.
Yes,
it's just so easy to like be like, oh, everyone's doing these great things, but you also don't see the other side, you know. So of how many things they got turned down for, all of that. So
definitely. So I'm also interested sort of a little bit in like your mission with VOSStudios and just photography in general. You talk a lot about how photography has a really great power to encourage empathy, and sort of how the people that come to you or the people you photograph, you try to show the things that words can't express. So in words, which I know is sort of counterintuitive, do you think you could talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit less of that now in like the commercial realm. Kind of when I do more of like my side projects or in like New York, I feel like I have more control to be able to kind of do some of that. But I still definitely, I try to cater to the human side, I guess. Like I feel like I'm not just creating portraits. My style is like very like clean and simple. So I feel like it really like showcases who that person is. And for me, for some reason, it's always been like about the eyes. And I feel like there's so much like behind people's eyes that even if people look so different, you still see those same like raw emotions and like feelings. So that's always kind of been central to my work. And then also just like the whole experience here, I try to really, I don't know, make them feel better about themselves when they walk out as when they leave. Like it's so rewarding when, you know, you have a girl that's so nervous and anxious and like doesn't know again if she can live up to the social media images of everyone else, and then, you know, you show the back of the camera and she's like, I've never felt so beautiful, you know, that sort of thing. So we really just try to like, I don't know, lift people up and make them feel positive about themselves, because it's not always so easy with all the media. So
Definitely. So this is sort of a heavy question, but I think like for younger people, like the definitions of success can be really more, like you said, by social media, or just, you know, in general by these sort of lofty goals that people have straight out of college or, you know, out of high school. So do you have a personal definition of success, or do you think that's changed sort of through your professional endeavors?
Yeah, that's a pretty tough question. I mean, I think the big things that I see, obviously, like you need to be able to support yourself and your family and put food on the table and that sort of thing. But also, like, on the other hand, I know it's cliche, but like money doesn't buy happiness, and I've definitely seen that as well. So for me, it's kind of, my success is I can, you know, make a difference in people's lives. I can inspire people. I can put food on my table. I can pay my mortgage. I can spend time with my dog. You know, I can, like, for me, it's more about after I've completed those basic needs of like finding happiness and balance, I think is really, that's like my word of the year, I think, is balance. That's my version of success, but everyone's version is so different, I think.
Definitely. So one last question for you is about sort of, in retrospect, is there something that you would tell your younger self, or just even like people sort of like my age graduating college, you know, the sort of 20-somethings, that you wish you would have known later on?
There's a variety of things I would say, but I think the most important one that I've kind of seen in my life is just to like embrace yourself and like be you, because I'm very quirky and very eccentric, and it took me a long time to like appreciate that and be willing to like share that with others. And I feel like so many of us are so afraid to like be ourselves.
Yeah.
And you can't really be happy if you're not yourself, and the people around you aren't going to be happy if you're not yourself either.
Yeah.
So I feel like, yeah, you just have to like be you and not be afraid to like share that with the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking today, Emily. Really appreciate it. And thanks for watching. So this has been Emily Voss, the founder and sole photographer of Voss Photography. Thank you very much for watching. I will have links to the Conversationalist podcast with Emily Voss and all the other people I've interviewed down below, in addition to the Conversationalist website, Twitter, Facebook page, all of that. So until next time, I'll speak to you soon.